Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the graduate webinar series. Melbourne 2020 graduate webinar series. Today's event or today's session is about the Melbourne Juris Doctor. Before we start, we would like to acknowledge the elders and descendants of the Wurundjeri people who have been and are the custodians of these lands. We acknowledge that the land on which we meet was the place of age-old ceremonies of celebration, initiation and renewal, and that the local Aboriginal peoples have had and continue to have a unique role in the life of these lands. So welcome everyone to this evening's webinar. I'd like to say hello to everyone from across Australia and also overseas across the world from different time zones. These webinars will be recorded, so just be aware that if you need to come back to these webinars, they will be available at the end of the end of the presentation. Today's webinar will have a presentation from Mr. Alan Duke, the Associate Dean of the Melbourne Juris Doctor, and he will be joined by Mary Wee, the Admissions Manager, in the question and answer session. So the way the format will run is Alan Duke will actually do the presentation. Once the presentation is finished, we'll then open it up to questions. Just to let you know that if you do have questions, that you can actually enter those questions into the chat window, which you'll see there usually on the right-hand side of your sort of screen there. And our colleagues from Melbourne Law School will do their best to answer those questions as we go. The questions that aren't answered, and we are over only 45 minutes, they can be submitted on the study website after the webinar. So please feel, if you don't have your question answered, you can always go back onto study and our team will be able to answer your question at a later stage. So I guess without any further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Alan Duke, the Associate Dean of the Melbourne Juris Doctor.
Hi there, sorry, I had a technical glitch there. My name's Alan, and I will hopefully in my presentation deal with most of the questions that you have, but as Paul's mentioned, please feel free to submit the questions if there's anything that I don't deal with or if you seek clarification. So moving on to the next slide. Melbourne Law School and the University of Melbourne does very well in the international rankings, and you can see the numbers on the screen there. Top law school in the country, top university in the country. And I think to properly understand those rankings, it's important to understand how are they determined, what's being factored in. What's factored into the rankings are things such as the teaching and learning, environment and experience, the research reputation and influence of the academic staff, the reputation of graduates with employers, and international outlook. And so what we really think this reflects is the innovative approach to legal education that Melbourne adopts, the high quality of the teaching and learning experience and the expertise of the academic staff. In terms of where our graduates work, we see our graduates find many different jobs, some within the legal sector, which are the ones listed at the top there, and then others more sort of outside of the sector. So we have former students working as judges, barristers, solicitors, lawyers in a variety of non-government organisations, community legal centres, so an incredible range of legal opportunities. And as well as that, people of the JD have studied the JD often move on to do things such as management consulting, merchant banking, diplomatic work, or being an academic. So that gives you a broad overview of just how useful the law degree can be. The JD leads to practice in all of Australian jurisdictions and can be used as a basis for seeking admission into other jurisdictions. So Paul, if you just skip on to the next one. Yep. In terms of the basic course structure, there are 24 subjects that you need to complete, 16 are compulsory subjects and 8 are elective subjects. If you studied the degree full time, you would do the first 8 subjects in the first year and then the electives and the remaining compulsories towards the end. However, there's absolutely no expectation that you do study full-time. We have a full-time option which would see the degree completed within 5 years. There are also a range of part-time options. So you can take the degree over up to 6 years, Or if you wanted to, we can put together a course plan that would see you finish in 3.5, 4 years, or 5 years. So there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to how long you can take to do the degree. In terms of when the degree commences, it commences in early February with a 2-week intensive subject, which is really quite important. It gives you all of the relevant skills that you need, but most importantly, it's taught in small groups. And so we find that the students develop a very strong sense of cohort and connection very early on. And it's not uncommon for students at the very end of the degree to report that their core group of friends is still a friendship that was formed in that group. Moving on to the next slide, a couple of the benefits of the JD are many and varied. It's taught at a graduate level, so it means that it's a higher level qualification than the LLB, an undergraduate law degree. And it also means that the students that you have in the classroom come with very well established study habits, but also an incredible range of backgrounds. And so you have quite vigorous and active discussions with people contributing from various perspectives with the benefit of an undergraduate degree behind them. We have seminar style learning, so there's classes are discussion based, there's always opportunities to ask questions as you go through. The teacher will get to know you because of the relatively small sizes of the classes. And as the rankings indicate, the teachers are generally experts and at the forefront of their relevant areas. Just finally, the cohort experience is quite important. As I said, you will start off with that intensive subject in February, and then part of that group will travel into the first semester. So you'll have, again, some people that you're quite familiar with. Moving on to the next slide, there are a range of clinical education opportunities that are available. And what these opportunities allow students to do is to take on real legal work. So they will provide advice and representation work, for example, give one-on-one advice to clients under close supervision of academic staff and also legal practitioners. So there's a range of opportunities here. We have a disability human rights clinic, a legal internship clinic, a tax law clinic. So there's a range of different things that students can do to develop these skills. And the smiling faces you see in the photo there are students who had attended the Flemington Community Legal Clinic, and they're attending a case that they worked on whilst they were at the clinic. In addition to clinical legal opportunities, there are also internship opportunities. And so these internship opportunities place students within an organisation. Again, it gives them the ability to develop some core legal skills, but also familiar with how sort of an office environment works. Students have found these very useful to enhancing their CV, but more importantly, to get some real feedback on their career direction. Is this something they've enjoyed that they'd like to explore more? And also to develop some connections with the people in the organisations that they're working with. In addition to, in addition to the legal internships, we also have some other practical experiences as well. So we have a subject called Law Apps, where students work in groups to design and build and release an app that is designed to make the law accessible. So it is designed to provide legal information to non-lawyers. And we think that that's a key skill that for law graduates to have. We have a street law program where students go into secondary schools and teach about laws of relevance. So it might be about consumer protection law. What does the student do if the phone doesn't work? And again, that really hones the student's ability to take what they've learned at the law school and actually be able to explain it to a non-law audience. There's also a range of student-run competitions, but I'll come back to those when I talk to you in more detail about our student organisations. We have a very, very broad range of elective subjects. So in this year, we ran over 40 subjects, and I won't read through the list in its entirety there, but you'll see there's an incredibly broad range, including some core commercial subjects, including human rights subjects, and also importantly, including some practical skills development subjects. So legal drafting, negotiation, mediation, and advocacy. So there's an incredibly broad range of JD electives. And in addition to this, you also have the option of undertaking one subject from our master's offering. And our master's offering has well over 100 subjects each year. So there's an incredible choice when it comes to elective subjects. we're always developing new subjects, and so one of the suite of subjects that we're developing at the moment relates to technology and the law. So we've added some new subjects that are listed there. New technology law, which deals with is taught, sorry, I should say, in conjunction with staff from PricewaterhouseCoopers, and explores the role of enabling and controlling new technologies such as blockchain or artificial intelligence. The startup law subject really tries to sort of draw together what things that students have learned in other subjects, but work out how you apply those laws to these quite new situations. And there's a range of other extracurricular technology options available as well. One other thing is that you will be very well supported throughout your degree, and one of those key supports comes from our Legal Academic Skills Centre. Headed by Dr. Chantal Morton, this centre offers an incredible range of services. So Chantal runs a workshop series that is designed to help students develop their study skills, to provide guidance about reading legal tests, time management, note-taking, and also seminars workshops that are designed to provide skills about different types of assessment that they will come across during the degree. In addition, under the Writing Centre, students have the options with most forms of assessment, if they're organised, to show a draft to one of the staff members in the Legal Academic Skills Centre and get some feedback on that paper. So that support for particularly important when you're starting to learn a new discipline. There's also a range of publications designed to provide advice to students, and also the EAGLE program, Early Academic Guidance for Legal Education. And that program sees first year students in first semester broken into groups of 10 to 15 people and taught by a later year student. And that later year student is designed to give them some practical, useful advice, the lessons they have learnt throughout their degree. And so we found that that's particularly supportive of the in first semester. There are some international opportunities that are available to those enrolled in the JD, and these range from something as short as a 2-week travelling subject to possibly spending a year abroad. And so just to talk through some of these opportunities, one is a degree partnership. And what this allows you to do is to complete, it allows you to complete 2.5 years of the JD, and then complete another year master's program at one of the institutions that's listed there. And so essentially you do 4 less electives, and the master's study that you do is credited towards your degree. So if you're eligible, and it really also depends on being accepted into these institutions, you'll be able to walk away, if you studied full time, that is, with a JD and a master's degree in 3.5 years. In addition to the degree partnerships, there are a range of other international opportunities, including subjects that are run by the law school but taught overseas. And so examples of those subjects are a subject economic and business law in Asia, which is taught in Shanghai and Hong Kong. Students are away for 10 days. Law and legal practice in Asia saw students spend a month in India. In addition to that, we are a member of the Centre for Transnational Legal Studies, and they offer an intensive semester-long subject that is really designed to make sure that students are able to address legal problems across national boundaries, dealing with different legal rules and different legal cultures. And so finally, there's also the possibility that you could spend a semester abroad going on exchange to a range of institutions that the law school has strong relationships with. Moving on to the careers service, the law school has a dedicated careers service, so it's provided in-house by a team of law school staff members, and they provide a range of services, including one-on-one consultations to assist with resume help or providing interview tips, assistance with drafting resumes, cover letters, more general career planning advice, so working out, are you headed down a commercial track, a public interest track, whatever else, criminal law track, whatever it may be, you can get some guidance. They have very close connections with the profession. And so, for example, students have the option of being mentored by a member of the profession, and students have found that really useful to sort of have that insight into the law, into the legal system from the get-go, from when they start studying. We also have a work shadowing programs where students are able to follow around legal professionals. And so there's a range of services that are available and provided by the dedicated career service, including the organisation of careers fairs. And so, for example, we have members of firms, employers from Hong Kong visit once a year. They didn't this year for obvious reasons, but it visit once a year, put on a show to the students, and we've had students get direct, sort of have found jobs through that process. So the careers service is helpful, particularly towards the end of the degree when you're trying to work out what to do next. Another strength, I think, of the law school is the strength of the student groups. And I've been particularly reminded of just how effective those groups are as they've helped us navigate our way through the challenges that we've seen this year. The Melbourne University Law Student Society does a range of things. They organise a range of competitions which really build on the experience that you're having within the classroom. There are mooting competitions, fake cases, witness examinations, negotiations, and client interview competitions. And quite often members of the profession are drawn in to judge these competitions. And students have found that they're very useful in developing their practical skills. The LSS also runs careers events and also student support programs. So the Stepping Stones programs see law school students mentoring secondary school students who might be interested in law and come from underrepresented schools. And the Pathfinder program sees law students allocated to the LMR groups, the intensive subject that I talked about before, and those students then stick with that group throughout the semester. So there's an overlap with the EAGLE program I talked about before, which is very much a law school run thing about academic endeavours. The Pathfinder program does do that as well, but is really about making sure that there's social connections between the students. There are some also on the next slide, some other groups. Again, I won't read them all out, but there's a range. If you like something, you should be able to find others that share that interest with you. So global students, arts and media, sports law, public interest law, there's a range of particular interest groups that meet as well. To have a look at the entry requirements, there are two pathways into the JD. So you can come into the JD either under general entry, and this is the way that the majority of students enter the JD. And this will be based on your tertiary performance, and I'll give you some more details in a moment. The second way is through the guaranteed entry pathway, and that's based on your year 12 result. And again, I'll come back to that in a moment to give you some more detail. In terms of the entry requirements, ordinarily, we would assess applications by looking at your academic performance in all previous tertiary studies and also looking at your LSAT score. However, it has not been possible for us to be confident that the LSAT can be administered effectively in all of the jurisdictions from which our students come. And so for that reason, we are not using the LSAT as a measure, as an assessment tool this year. However, the plan is very much to resume the use of the LSAT in 2022. So just skipping ahead, Paul. So what will we look at when it comes to 2021? We will be looking solely at your previous tertiary study. And unfortunately, this does make it a little bit difficult for us to give you an indication as to exactly what results you would need. What I'll talk to you about in the subsequent slides is how we typically look at, or how we've looked at applications in the past when the LSAT's being used. And whilst we still don't know exactly what level of application we'll get this year, for example, with the LSAT being removed, I think these grade points still give you some indication of sort of how you're faring. When we do use the LSAT, there is of course also an interrelationship between the LSAT and the GPA. So a higher GPA may see you get in with a slightly weaker LSAT and vice versa. But as I said, for those interested in 2021, the application is purely based on your grade point average taken over all of your previous tertiary studies. Graduate Access Melbourne is an equity program that is designed to give access to those underrepresented at the university. And to be eligible, you need to fit in one of the categories on the screen: of Indigenous Australian background, refugee or holder of a humanitarian visa, disability or medical condition, disadvantaged socioeconomic background, from a rural or isolated area, or other personal difficulties that have affected your studies. If you think you fall within that category, if you simply Google Graduate Access Melbourne Uni Melb, it will come up with a lot more information about eligibility and detail when it comes to this scheme. Moving on to have a look at the general entry requirement. So you'll recall that we said there's two ways you can come in, general entry or through the Year 12 system. We're now looking at those who apply at the end of their degree and are seeking entry based this year exclusively on tertiary results, ordinarily on the basis of tertiary results and LSAT. There are four different fee categories: international, Australian Commonwealth supported place, and we have roughly 100 of those per intake, and they are distributed on the basis of academic merit and also on the basis of special considerations. The second category is the Australian fee place with a JD bursary, and I'll talk to you in a moment when we look at the next slide about the bursary. The Australian fee place position, and then an international fee place position. And I should note, you don't need to, if you're a domestic applicant, you don't need to be concerned about this distinction when it comes to making your application, because you will automatically be considered for all of the fee categories. So moving on just to look quickly at the bursary scheme. The idea behind the bursary scheme is to provide assistance to students where there will be a gap between the amount that they're able to put on the government loan system and the totality of their undergraduate and also postgraduate course fees. And so the aim of the bursary program is to bridge that gap. And you'll note on the, or you probably didn't, on the previous slide, there was a reference to there being 130 bursary positions in 2020. We aim to expand that next year to increase not only the amount of the bursary, but offering additional 30 places under that bursary category. And so if you signed up to the Future Law, which I'll get to at the end of the presentation, there'll be more information distributed about the bursaries in 2021. Next slide, please, Paul. The second entry, as we talked about, is the guaranteed entry. And so there are three ways that you can come in based on your ATAR, your Year 12 results. And I should say, although we're talking about ATAR, we're talking really about ATAR or International Baccalaureate equivalent to that score. So the three ways that you can come in under the ATAR is under the Melbourne Chancellor's Scholarship Program. If you attain an ATAR of 99.90 or above, you must complete an undergraduate degree at the University of Melbourne, and this will lead you to a Commonwealth supported place if you're a domestic student, or an guaranteed international fee place if you're an international student, or a guaranteed Commonwealth supported place if you're a domestic student. And you apply through the university in your final year of the undergraduate degree. If you have the fee place guarantee, if you have a score of 99 or above, and you manage to achieve a WAM of 75 or above in your undergraduate degree, you are guaranteed an Australian fee place. You are guaranteed, if you're an international student, an international fee place. And local applicants, domestic applicants, can also at this point sit the LSAT, or this year apply based solely on their GPA in the hope that they may attain a Commonwealth supported place. So this gets you a guarantee, but only a guarantee of a fee place, but you will be eligible in the same way that anyone else would be once to apply for a CSP position. And then just finally, we have the graduate degree package. And this is where students make a decision at the Year 12 level, so not at the end of the university studies. You can choose to do a combination of our broad undergraduate degrees and also law. And if you have an ATAR of 99.80 or above, you're guaranteed the entry into the JD for local students under a Commonwealth supported place, and for international students under a fee place. And that application is not made to the university in your final year of the degree. It's made through VTAC, through the usual preference system for Year 12 students. In terms of when the applications open, they are open now. Okay, so it's possible to open now. They will close in October. So for domestic students, it's the 10th of October is the final date to submit your application. And for international students, it's the 25th of October. Then in November, you will be notified, domestic students will be notified of their offer and their fee type. International student applications are assessed on a rolling basis, so international students may hear earlier. And then if you're successful and you accept the offer, then the JD will commence in February 2021. So just on the final slide, there's just some sources of additional information for you. So you can connect with us by joining the Future Law newsletter. You can do that by following that link there. or just visiting our website, and you'll see that when you land on the website, there's information for prospective students, which provides more detail of the type of things that I've talked about today. So having said all of that, I will now hand over to the moderators and to Mary. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for that presentation. So Alan just gave you just a basic sort of, I guess, overview, should I say, of the Melbourne JD. Basically a bit about structure, the great selling, the great sort of, I guess, the great positive parts of the JD, and also a little bit about the selection. So at this stage, I'd like to sort of also welcome Mary to our webinar panel here. And Mary is our admissions manager, so she looks after all the applications that come in for the Melbourne Juris Doctor. And so what we'll do is we'll take some questions from the chat room here that we might be able to get Alan and Mary. You can both sort of jump in and sort of answer these questions, and we'll try to get through as many questions as we can before we wrap up this webinar. The first question I have here, which is it's quite a popular question here, is how can I improve my application without the LSAT? So Alan, you did mention that it's only by WAM, or your grade point average. If that's the only, is that the only thing that that I can use to apply for the JD? Obviously, it says that's what we're going to be using, but is there any way I can actually improve my application? Is there something else I could do? Those type of things. Mary, Alan, would you like to discuss?
So unfortunately for 2021, it will be assessed solely on the GPA. And the only advice that I'd give you, Mary may have something else to say, is that an upward trajectory, we do look at the consistency of results, and where the results improve towards the end of the degree, then that is taken into account. And now that's the only thing I can really think of to potentially improve prospects, because it will just be assessed solely on the basis of the tertiary results in 2021.
No, that's absolutely right. Just one other thing to add to that would be the Graduate Access Melbourne. So if there was a reason why your results weren't as good, perhaps one particular semester something happened to you that you want to explain in detail, then I would encourage you to have a look at the Graduate Access Melbourne. There were those categories in there, but there's also a personal difficulties category. So if you find that your circumstances that happened to you that impacted your marks in that particular semester, or it could be an ongoing issue affecting your entire degree, if it's not adequately answered through the categories that are there, then have a look at personal difficulties, where you're able to explain what the difficulties were, but also put in evidence to show that that's indeed what happened in that time, and the selection committee will have a look at that.
Great, thank you so much for that, Mary and Alan. And I think the big thing, I guess a lot of people need to remember when you do put something in like a GAM application, it's you need to provide that evidence, and I think that's the big part of it. That it's good to provide that documentation. You must take that time to supply that documentation, so the selection committee can have a look at everything and see everything that has affected you.
It's
so
really
that brings
important.
us to another popular question here, and Alan, you did. Yes, really important. I should say Mary says it's really important. It's absolutely essential. So get that evidence in there and make sure it's all good. The other question we have on that, I guess you touched on this as well, Alan, is the WAM. What WAM are you expecting? I guess this is unprecedented. We haven't sort of had to not use the LSAT. So people just wanted to sort of a lot of people are sort of saying, look, realistically, where should I be sort of sitting in my WAM to sort of have a chance of entering to a Melbourne Juris Doctor? If you guys can perhaps touch on that, or what your thoughts on that would be, or maybe expectations, those sort of things.
It's really hard to tell this year because we've never assessed a JD application without an LSAT before. So we actually do not have past precedents, except the WAMs that we've used in the past with an LSAT. We've had quite a number of applications come in as well this year. So that's the other thing that we don't really know as well, the number of applications that come in and where the WAM is going to fit. So as a result, what the selection committee have decided to do is to wait until the end of the year, where we can have a look at the intake as a whole and all of the applications as a whole, and then we will make a decision then on how many offers we will be making, but also, you know, where that WAM is going to lie. I would say that the best guess that we have would be on past years. So obviously a very competitive WAM would be those in the 80s, and then the next competitive will be in 75 and above. And if you're going anything under that, we can't really say. We're going to have a look at the applications as a whole. Do you have anything to add to that, Alan?
No? Okay. So thanks for that, Mary. I think that, yeah, I think this is, I guess, because it is unprecedented, we can only sort of have a guesstimate of where that WAM may actually fall. There's another question I have here, again, it's come up a few times, is we understand that obviously to enter the Melbourne Juris Doctor, you need to have completed an undergraduate degree in any sort of discipline. A lot of people are asking would I be disadvantaged if I took my undergraduate degree in another university, perhaps overseas or interstate, or another university that's not University of Melbourne? Can you answer that, Mary? What are your thoughts on that?
We're actually looking for a diversity in our cohort. So if you are coming from another institution, from other countries, we welcome you to put in an application.
It's a very significant proportion of the class that is from is not from the University of Melbourne. So as Mary said, we have people coming from all the states around Australia, all different places around the world, but even within Melbourne itself, having done undergraduate degrees at other Victorian universities.
And that's a good thing to also remember, that we don't discriminate just because you didn't come to University of Melbourne. You know, there's no preference sort of system on that. So absolutely, everyone has an equal go in applying for a Melbourne Juris Doctor. And as Mary said, we're looking for diversity. So I guess people from different backgrounds, different degrees and different universities are definitely people that we would absolutely consider. So please put your application if you're definitely not only from University of Melbourne, but from other universities, not only in Australia, but from overseas as well. So one of the other questions I sort of seem to get here is people talk about the workload of a Juris Doctor. And I think, Alan, you're probably the best person to speak to this, being the coordinator of the Melbourne Juris Doctor. A lot of students, that we do realise, a lot of students go in and we hear that it is a very intellectually, I guess, rigorous course. It will challenge students. And I think a lot of students are sort of trying to work out, like, you know, obviously I want to sort of commit to the Melbourne Juris Doctor, but also I need to be able to work perhaps, or I need to be able to sort of, you know, support myself. So what would be, I guess, the workload commitments of an average Melbourne Juris Doctor student in a week? Like, basically, I think a lot of students want to know is, like, is it that intense that JD is only my life? Is it that's going to be my life for the next 3 years? Or is there a way to be able to be able to work and have some sort of life studying at a Melbourne Juris Doctor? Alan, did you want to perhaps answer that one?
So I think I'll start by talking about how a student who wanted to complete full-time, so wanted to complete within 3 years, how they might be able to sort of build some release valves into their course. We offer some of the compulsory subjects as block intensive models, and also some of the elective subjects on that basis. And so what that has allowed a student who wants to finish within 3 years, but may want to drop down from 4 subjects a semester to 3, to do so and then catch up, so to speak, by doing that intensive subject. So that's been the approach so far. And we've also had students enroll full-time, but do it over maybe 3.5, 4 years, and sometimes up to 5. As of next year, we have a formal part-time pathway. And so we will have a course plan that allows students to drop down to 2 subjects per semester, and complete, as I said, over a 6-year period. And there will also be late afternoon to early evening classes that will facilitate that flexibility as well. So I think that there's flexibility for you to speed up or slow down, or to manage your workload also by taking on some of the intensive offerings that we have. I do think if you're studying full-time, it is a full-time commitment. It's like having a full-time job, and you should think about the extent to which you work as topping up a full-time job. You wouldn't, so I think, but if there is the flexibility there, and we have quite a lot of our students who decide that it works better for them also just to push it out by 6 months or so and be able to work more as they go through. So there's a lot of flexibility built into the degree for those that want to finish within 3 years or want to spread it out by a considerably longer period.
Great, thanks, Alan. So I guess, as you sort of mentioned, that it's and you did mention that we have this wellbeing area in your presentation where students who maybe I guess sort of are not really coping with the workload, the intensity, we have ways to actually, as you mentioned, Alan, to I guess that leave that pressure with this pressure valve thing release that we have. So that's
sorry, Paul. Our assistant dean of teaching and learning will sit down and give one-on-one consultations with students, and it's so she can get a feel for what do they actually want to do. Do they want to speed up? Do they want to spread it out as long as possible? Do late afternoon classes work better? Do intensives work better? And so she frequently comes up with individualized course plans. So if you're looking at course plans that you'll see on the website, they really are just starting points, but they're designed to demonstrate to you how you can progress through the degree at quite different paces. It also doesn't mean that once you start part-time, you need to work part-time. So it might be, for example, that towards the end of the degree, you just want to get out, you want to start working in a full-time capacity, and so you dial down your outside work and finish the degree more quickly. So you can speed up or slow down as you need to, with the flexibility of sort of catching up with those intensive offerings if you need to.
Thanks for that, Alan. We have one question that I always seem to get from a lot of students, and it's coming through in some of the chat functions in the chat room here, is that people talk about, am I JD worthy? I think there's this, people do know it's an intense program, and I think a lot of students think, am I good enough? Am I going to be able to cope with the Juris Doctor? As most people at home would know, that we take students from from disciplines other than law that do come in. So I think a lot of students, when they do come in, they're maybe a little bit nervous about, I guess, coming into such an intense program without a legal background or knowledge or anything like that. Perhaps that maybe, Alan, you can maybe talk a bit about maybe the LMR program, that 2-week subject intensive that we have, and how that may actually prepare students that feel that, I guess kind of ease them into, I think, Juris Doctor study.
Look, if you're feeling that way, you are definitely not in a minority. A lot of students, including the current students, have that sort of borderline imposter syndrome about them. You will be incredibly well supported, particularly in the first semester. So in the first semester, you'll start LMR in those intensive groups for 2 weeks. Your assessment will be marked within a matter of days, and you will get that feedback instantly on what you need to do before things you might need to revise before the semester starts. Then in semester 1, the subjects are put together to coordinate, obviously to deliver substantive material, but also to deliver coordinated skills development. So with different subjects focusing on different things. And whilst you go through that first semester, you've got the support of the EAGLE program that I talked about before, the law school breaking students into groups of 10 or 15 under the supervision of later law students. The LSS program, which is, as I said, similar, but designed to pursue social goals. The resources and the workshops offered by the Legal Academic Skills Centre, the ability to have individual consultations with members from the Academic Skills Centre, and of course to speak with your lecturers as well. So particularly in the first semester, there is an incredible amount of support around you. The EAGLE program doesn't continue on throughout the whole degree, but you still have those other resources, the advice on assessment, the one-on-one consultations, and the close contact with the teachers. So I think it's natural to feel nervous, particularly at the pace. You really hit the ground running as a result of LMR, but there is quite a lot of support around you.
And even LMR is just a pass-fail, isn't it? So that they can focus on building those skills and not have to worry about results as well. So a lot of thought has gone into that transition into the JD.
Yep, and I should also say, a lot of students also think, I don't have the law background. Most of our students don't. Most of our students come with very different undergraduate backgrounds. So the idea of LMR is really to skill everyone up. And as Mary said, I think it's important to emphasize it's pass-fail. It's all about just making sure that there's a gentle start and that you can focus on developing those skills without being too panicked about sort of from the get-go, there's going to be something appearing on your transcript.
Great. Well, that's good to know. I think people don't realise that the Melbourne Law School has so many sort of great, I guess, processes and resources in place for students to actually help them through the Juris Doctor. Like students sort of say it's one of the most hardest things they've done, but it's the most rewarding thing that they've ever done. And I think having those resources and those procedures in place to help students through, it's a brilliant sort of thing. I think we've got time for probably one last question before we finish up. There's a lot of students that are asking if because this year their marks may be perhaps maybe under 70 or they're not 100% confident with their marks. And this is might be one for both of you here. If a student, for example, chooses their marks are under 70 and they decide to, they've kind of looked at it and they thought, well, it doesn't look like I'm going to, I don't qualify for the GAM. It's just going to go by results this year. Could students obviously then decide to postpone their, I guess, entry into 2021 and decide to then next year take the LSAT and then go into 2022? Would students be disadvantaged by that or discriminated against that in any way? I think people just want to know that if they don't meet the cut this year, just based on their WAM, can they then go next year and then concentrate on building a good LSAT and then coming into the 2022 intake? Does anyone have any comments to say a bit about that?
Look, you definitely can, but we will be assessing applications for 2022 on the basis of LSAT, but I don't think that that's a reason not to apply this year, because you just don't know. As Mary said, it is unfortunate because we just don't know what effect the not using the LSAT will have on the number of applications that we see. But applying this year with your GPA only in no way stops you from being able to reapply again next year when you may, for example, have that upward trajectory with your semester 2 results, but also the LSAT factoring in as well. So on that previous slide, we talked about aiming to be in the top 25% of the LSAT. We gave you the indications of, as Mary said, 80% very well placed. We think that they will still remain indicative, but we're just not sure. But that'll give you an indication. You might as well try for the GPA because you're in a position where you've got that option of trying this year and then also potentially trying again the following year. Did you have anything else, Mary?
Yeah, and just to mention that there's no disadvantage to applying this year and then reapplying next year. New year, it's a new application for the selection committee.
So I guess the moral of the story is absolutely have a crack for 2021 this year. This is probably unprecedented, so you might as well have a go, I guess, is the moral of the story in this case. That probably brings us up right to the end here of our webinar. I do apologise we haven't been able to answer your questions. We do have a few questions coming in. We've chosen the ones that the majority have actually asked. So please, if you haven't had your question answered, please take the opportunity to go onto our study website, our UOM study website, and lodge your question there, and our law team will be able to answer those questions and follow up on any concerns that you actually may have. I also like to take this opportunity now to thank Arlen and Mary for your time for this presentation. And I would also like to thank and extend my deepest thank you to all of those people, all the viewers at home there across Australia and the world. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules in lockdown to actually participate and view and participate in this Melbourne JD webinar. As Arlen said, we would like to absolutely have you apply for next year, and we would love to see you around the halls of law school in 2021. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating. And like I said, we'd like to see you in law school perhaps next year or the year after. So thank you and go well, and thank you very much for all your time.